thought the poster band for alt rock and alt pop rock in the 2000s, maybe even a bit of emo sprinkled in there too. Every girl you knew at school was trying to dye their hair to make themselves look like Hayley Williams. And let's be honest, if you, when you were a teenager, didn't at least a little bit fancy Hayley Williams, at least a little bit, you are lying. You are a big, big liar. Things have massively changed a lot since the 2000s though. The amount of bandmate changes and dramas within the band have really intensified over the years. Hayley Williams has gone through a divorce, I think she has as well. There's been lots of things. She went on a solo run for a little bit too. And the way that their sound has developed in the 2010s and beyond has been quite interesting to watch. It really did start with the Paramore self-titled album, which was a bit of a mixed bag with some of the attempts that they were going for, I think, especially those really pointless and little ukulele interludes that they kept doing. I don't know why they were on the album, but the direction was always interesting to see and to see where they take things. And it has provided us with one of their best albums with After Laughter. I think that is up there in their top 3, maybe even top 2, maybe even top 1, maybe even top 1, I don't know. But it has been quite strange to notice that they aren't really that band that were, you know, the front runners of emo pop rock in the 2000s anymore. Although maybe that isn't strange, because none of those bands want to be part of that scene nowadays. Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, they all just ditched it. I would certainly say that Paramore is by far the best to come out of that scene and emerge as being an interesting band that doesn't just do one thing and has tried to change their sound for the better, and it doesn't sound like shite. A lot of those bands in the 2000s are still going and they sound dog shit. I mean, who wants to listen to Blink-182 anymore? Seriously. And This Is Why is a solid follow-up to After Laughter. I think people putting it on a pedestal, and some people even putting it higher than that album, is kind of crazy. You are crazy. But I still think it's a solid album. It starts off with the kind of punchy and sort of Talking Heads inspired This Is Why, which has the anthemic chorus, "This is why I don't leave the house." It still, to me, sounds like a Pigeon Detective song. Please go listen to Pigeon Detectives and tell me that you are not hearing that, because they really do sound like Pigeon Detectives on this track. They did say in interviews and stuff that they are influenced from that kind of post-punk revival sound of the 2000s, you know, Block Party, bands like that. It makes total sense that this song reminds me of something from that era, so it's no surprise there. But it's a good tune. I think listening to this song multiple times though, the chorus is starting to get a little stale. I don't know how much longevity this song has, to be honest. It's fun, but hearing the "This Is Why," it gets a bit old. A little bit, a tad bit. Do you know what I mean? And this run for the first 3 tracks, to be fair, is actually quite good. The News is a really good little track as well. One of the best on the entire album for me. You've got that spunky chorus coming through. And then the guitar line is really good. It sounds really sharp too. Definitely one of the early signs that they are seriously taking this post-punk sound very seriously and pulling out of bands from maybe even the 80s. I mean, the C'est Comme Ça track, which has those spoken word verses, is like straight out of the Marquis Smith playbook. You know, it sounds straight out of something The Fall would do, or so many other bands from that era would do. I don't know if Hayley's quite pulling it off, and the chorus on that track is really annoying to my ears. So yeah, not too keen on it really, but I like that they are trying to do different things again. But running out of time, I mean, this is probably the best track on the whole thing, or it might be the second best track for me actually. But the groove on this track is really, really good. A really memorable chorus. There's no gimmicks, there's no messing about on this one like there were with C'est Comme Ça. It's a great track. For me, the other track that I think could be the best on the album is actually Crave, which I'm seeing a bit of a sleeper hit coming through on this one. This really crept up on me with more listens. I think the vocals are really nice, and some of the best vocals Hayley has put out in a while, actually. Easily the best vocal performance on the whole album. I really like how that longing feeling is presented on this track, and it's done really well with the way that she uses the word crave too. I think it's a really nice song. The track Liar, though, doesn't quite nail it as well. I think it's trying to slow things down a little bit too much. I'm not quite feeling the vocals on this track. I feel like it's reminding me of something that would have made it onto those Hayley Williams solo albums, which in hindsight I was far too positive on in my review, because I don't think that album has really stood up too well over the past couple of years, to be honest. But yeah, I'm just not really getting it. Not really getting much from it. And I think sometimes actually when Paramore do slow things down like this, they do get lost a bit. I've noticed this a lot, like on some of their earlier stuff too, tracks like Misguided Ghosts, or some of the slower tracks on the Paramore self-titled, or maybe even some of those slower tracks on After Laughter, are always some of my least favorite tracks. I like what they're going for in terms of like the lyrical angle and the emotions, but I just never really feel like they connect to me that much, which might be a bit controversial depending on how much you like those songs. But yeah, I'm never really sold on it when Paramore do this. I do like the track You First though. It's a catchy little tune, this one. They're definitely tapping into some like alt-rock radio sounds though, I think. Like you're definitely going to hear this on some alt-rock radio stations, to be honest. That's kind of the minor issue with this album too, where they kind of just sound like anybody. There's not that much of an identity to some of these tracks, but it is still a good track and it's catchy and it's listenable. And yeah, I quite like the idea of, you know, talking about how she keeps accidentally like feeding the stray animal, which is like the devil on her shoulder. It's a nice little worded way to put that sort of thing. And yeah, I guess there's not much else to say really. I think this is a solid album. I think there's some great little rock tunes on this. I think there's some interesting lyrical ideas coming through as well. It doesn't really fully come together and make this amazing release for me. I don't actually think it's as close to some of their best work either. Like I'd probably put Riot above this, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think it's decent. I think it's a decent album, and I enjoy what they're going for with some of the influences coming from like post-punk and things like that. Doesn't really feel like it has a huge amount of identity to it, because again, some of those influences do shine through quite obviously, but I still rate this album. I think it's decent. 6.5 out of 10 from me. I am interested to see what people think, because I've seen a lot of praise for this, and if you love it, please tell me why you do in the comments. If you don't like it, would also love to see why. Interested to see your thoughts. Subscribe if you haven't already as well. Check out my Patreon, that would be amazing. Have a good day, and goodbye.